This evening.
Oh, I'm fine.
Good. Now, let's get excited. Welcome into the Billy Goodman Happening. Al, you are the gentleman who literally worked the instruments on the Philadelphia experiment. Is that correct?
Yes, the equipment in the hold, as I called it, and the experiment.
Okay. What ship was this on?
The Eldridge.
Oh, that's it, the Eldridge.
173.
Okay. Now, there has been, I've had a lot of calls on this. I think Berlitz wrote a book. Is that correct? The gentleman by the name of Berlitz.
Berlitz and Moore.
How does your story compare what Berlitz had to say?
Well, the book is written by Berlitz and Moore, which was released in '79. Leaves a lot of holes and a lot of gaps because he did not have all of the information. At that time, they were still running into the same problem that I think everyone who has attempted to research the matter has run into. The Navy is not talking. They don't release files. They've kept some pictures classified for up to 25 years or more after the event, when they had absolutely no connection with the Philadelphia experiment at all. And they have just sat tight on it. They deny to this day that the experiment ever happened.
They deny it, huh?
That's right.
There are no records about it? Well, how do we know about it?
There are records, but the problem is that it's actually in a category of hearsay and remembrance from people who survived it at that time and those who have lived this long who do remember it because everybody went through a debriefing, which is another polite term for brainwashing.
Aha, we've heard that term before by
I'm sure you have.
people such as Bill Cooper.
Yes.
And things of that. Now, it has been termed the Cosmic Watergate. How does it come? Now, where does cosmic fit into this whole thing? You know, we're very much involved with the cosmic entities and stuff of that nature. How does cosmic fit in with the Philadelphia experiment? You've got to touch us.
That is rather hard to fit in as a term as such. The big problem that developed in the final and fully disastrous test, which was 12 August 1943, was the fact that it locked up with another experiment being conducted in the period of August 1983, also the same date, 12 August. Due to the fact that they were both running the same general type of equipment, both experiments had been designed by the same person, Dr. John Neumann, and many aspects of the equipment were the same, plus another aspect, which was the so-called biorhythms of the Earth itself, which peak out every 20 years and happened to peak out on the 12th of August, 1943, 63, 83 et al. This added to it, and the whole thing locked up.
Whoa. You're listening to Al Bielek. Al, what was your rank in those days?
In those days, I was in the Navy as lieutenant commander.
Oh, a lieutenant commander. So you were a main gazinga Dorton then, as they say.
Yeah, something like that. My brother was he had a higher rank. He was captain.
He was the captain?
Yeah.
Was he the captain of the ship?
No.
Oh, okay, but...
the ship was a Captain Engel, who was a selected captain for that experiment. He was not the captain that was used later when the ship was finally sent to sea.
Al, can I ask you to talk directly in your telephone and speak up a bit for us? It's just a little bit faint.
Can you hear me all right?
Yes, we can hear you, but I'd appreciate if you get directly there, so more like a microphone type of sound. Al Bielek is in Phoenix, Arizona, and Al was the lieutenant colonel, and
Commander.
You're the lieutenant commander. Where was the equipment?
The equipment was in the hold, so to speak. There were two large generators, which were in the hole where the normal forward gun turret and magazine would be. There were additional to that 4 large RF transmitters, which were below decks. They had a special antenna structure up on the highest point of the ship. That particular antenna structure was the design of T. Townsend Brown. And the coils, which were driven by the generators, were on the deck of the ship. The equipment was very much similar to some of the earlier designs which were used for the degaussing work for the magnetic mines developed by the Germans about 1938. But they were similar, but not identical. The principles were nearly the same.
Did you know what the plan was right from the beginning?
No, because I didn't join it at that time. I joined the operation in 1939. Enlisted in the Navy in 1939, September. My brother also at the same time. And both of us went to what they call 90 days of special schooling at a special little location the Navy maintains in Rhode Island. We were what you would probably call 90-day wonders. We went through the school, and we came out, and we were assigned to the Institute of Advanced Studies, where the project was already well underway.
Are you referring to Quonset Point?
No.
You said Rhode Island.
Point.
A smaller base in Rhode Island than Quonset Point?
I'm sorry?
What base was that, by the way?
The one where I went, or where it was stationed?
In Rhode Island, you said. What was the name of the base?
Oh, that was, trying to remember the name of that town now. There were two...
Newport?
No, it was not Newport.
Uh-huh. Jamestown?
Nope.
Wow. What could it be? Anyway, okay, because I'm originally from there.
I'll come up with a name.
Yeah, okay. So you were stationed in Rhode Island?
Only for 90 days.
Yeah, right. But this is where they did some special training. Did you know what they were doing or what their plan was?
No, that was not put on us at that point. You see, this was standard Navy training for officers' school.
Oh, I see. Okay.
And after we left there and went to the Institute of Advanced Studies is when we became part of the experiment. It was actually at the school I'm referring to as Provincetown, Rhode Island.
Okay, that's Massachusetts. It's Providence, Rhode Island, but it may be thinking Providence, but Provincetown.
Provincetown. Yeah.
That's Massachusetts. That's out in Cape Cod. I know the area you're talking about. Anyways, the general area of the East Coast is where they do the training. We're talking with Al Bielek, and we're talking about the Philadelphia experiment. Where did they go up with this name, the Philadelphia experiment? Where does Philadelphia come from?
That comes from the fact that the final phases of the experiment were conducted in the harbor at Philadelphia.
Uh-huh.
And that's how it got dubbed with the name Philadelphia Experiment. The actual classified government name was Project Rainbow.
Right, Project Rainbow. Oh, boy. We'll get back. Bielek was a lieutenant commander aboard the Eldridge. More, I guess, known in the news, and people talking about it, as the Philadelphia Experiment. And he was the gentleman that literally ran the equipment. Getting back to your training in Rhode Island or whatever else it was being done, when did you know that something unusual was about to take place or was going to be attempted?
We didn't know that until after the whole history of events. See, we were joined in January of 1940. At that point, work was already well underway. They had a partially successful test in 1936. And in the period around 1940 sometime, they had a very successful test at Brooklyn Navy Yard involving a small ship, a tender, and two adjacent vehicles which supplied the cable to the special equipment aboard the tender. No personnel were on board. It was a dry run, so to speak. The tender became completely invisible, so at that point the Navy was very happy. They knew they had something that they were very desirous of having, so in September 1940 they classified the whole project.
Okay, so now you just touched that word very quickly and went by. It became invisible, folks. Are you ready for this? We're going back to the 40s. We're not talking about today, something really unusual. We're talking about in the 40s. They could make things invisible. How did it work? Tell us about this, Al. This is fascinating. What did you have that made things invisible in those days?
Well, it gets into very complex theory involving mathematical concepts, which include David Hilbert's ideas of multiple space, the work done by Dr. Van Neumann. Nikola Tesla was the first director of the project.
Here we go. There's the name, Nikola Tesla, huh?
And the general idea was that based on ideas that go back into the 30s, actually 1931 with P.D. Ouspensky, in his book Tertium Organum, in English that means New Model of the Universe.
Mm-hmm.
He talked then of the fact that we live in a 5-dimensional reality. The 3 physical dimensions we know, the 4th dimension, which was time, and the 5th dimension he wasn't very clear on, is rather hazy.
Mm-hmm.
As the work was developed, and the theory was developed by these people through a period of time up into the early 40s, they recognized the fact that the 4th and 5th dimensions are time. The 4th is a linear dimension of the flow of time. The 5th is a spinner. And what they were doing or attempting to do was to provide a partial rotation of the time field in order to make the ship invisible. Radar energy would then pass straight through it without reflection, and also optical energy would pass through without being seen. They were not attempting, in the initial considerations, to make the ship go away, disappear to another realm, another universe, so to speak, merely a matter of optical and radar invisibility. Very complex theories were involved and some very complex hardware.
So by messing with it, they literally wound up in another universe, basically, is what I'm hearing you say. Al Bielek is my guest. Boy, this is fascinating. what did the equipment look like? Kind of describe what the equipment looked like for us.
Well, I can describe it in part. Not insofar as the tender was concerned, because that was preliminary equipment, but in the Eldridge, they had two very large generators. If anyone has seen the commercial movie entitled The Philadelphia Experiment, done by E.M.I. Thorne of England, the rendition done in there is quite accurate in many respects.
Mm-hmm.
There were two very large generators mounted vertically, not three. They did play with a third, but they had problems with it and pulled it out. It was driven by an overhead motor with two right-angle gearboxes. They were very large. They put out 75 kVA apiece. They were driven in their fields. There were 5 field windings for each one. They were driven by large banks of electron tubes, 6L6s in the final design, 3,000 of them, 1,500 per generator. And preceding that was a lot of other equipment, a master pulse generator, other various types of equipment, all of which tied in not only to the generators, but also to the RF equipment, which consisted of 4 large RF transmitters with 2 megawatt capability. Now, Tesla's original approach, the equipment was run on a real-time analog basis, continuous, not pulsed. When Van Neumann took over in March of 42, after Tesla's test bombed out, which in case he deliberately sabotaged it.
Oh, hold it. Stop right there. You mean Tesla had tested it, and he
built the equipment that worked in 1940.
Right, and then he wanted it to bomb out?
Yes, because of the fact that he became very aware of the fact that the power required to make a large ship, the line invisible, whether it be a destroyer, a cruiser, or a battleship, was very high-powered equipment, enormously powerful, and he knew there would be problems with the personnel, reactions, violent, psychological, physiological reactions.
He knew it ahead of time?
Yes.
How about that, folks? He knew it ahead of time, just like he knew about alternating current ahead of time. He was ahead of everybody every time, it seems, this man. Wow. Okay, so the equipment itself, you described it quite nicely. What did you do? Like, did you flip a switch and it activated and that was it, or?
No, there was a lot more than a switch. There were separate control switches for the generators. There was what they did in the sequence of operations. The generators were brought up first, and they were powered to the fields of the generators. Then they turned on the balance of the RF equipment with the pulse generators, the pulse modulators, which drove the RF equipment. That was brought on last. And then the interactive effects between the very powerful magnetic fields, pulsed fields generated by the coils, and the RF fields produced the effects. That did not come on instantly, and you turned the equipment on sequentially.
What were you witnessing with your own eyes as this equipment was turning on piece by piece by piece, so to speak?
When we were down in the hold, as my brother and myself, we did not see anything unusual at that point initially, because we were inside of a steel room, quite literally.
Right.
The effects that were visible from the outside and from the observer ships, and from some of the personnel who were deliberately stationed on the deck. And what they observed was some strange rotating fields, then fog. Then they couldn't see the shore or the ocean anymore. That's from inside the ship's perimeter of those fields.
Right.
Externally, in terms of the observer ships, there was more than one. There was a Navy ship. There was also a merchant marine ship, the SS Freyosef. They were interested because of the fact that in 43 we were losing 50% of our shipping to the German submarine fleets. And they thought if we were successful, they wanted in on it also.
Sure.
What they saw externally were rotating fields, and the ship in the initial test, which was 22 July 43 on the Eldridge, they not only had radar invisibility, they had optical invisibility, but they also had severe personnel problems. And the reason Tesla bombed out on this is he did not wish to be responsible for the problems with the personnel. The Navy would not give him any additional time in which to solve the problem. They said, there's a war on, you have a deadline, meet it. In other words, don't change it, make it work. Typical military philosophy, if you will.
Right.
And they were under pressure.
Yeah.
Unknown to most people at that time, and unknown to myself and my brother at that time, was the Navy was in a race with the Army over the atomic bomb as to which secret project would be used in the war. As it ultimately worked out, of course, the atomic bomb project won out.
Holy mackerel. Oh, boy. Al Bielek is my guest. If you have a question for him, feel free to give us a call. You sent me. It says several of the crew burst into flames in spontaneous human combustion.
Well, it was a very strange phenomena. They burst into flames, but like the proverbial burning bush of Moses in the Bible, the bush that burned, it was not consumed. The same thing happened to these people, to these sailors. They were on fire, as it were, and were not consumed. It was a very, very difficult problem. The Navy spent a fortune on equipment to try and solve this problem and quell it afterwards. The apocryphal stories were, and these were the ones were circulated by Carlos Miguel Allende, who was not on board the Navy ship, but was a witness from an adjacent ship and heard the stories later, was that one of the ways they tried to kill the phenomena and bring these sailors back to normalcy was the thing of people who were still in a normal mode grab the hands of the sailors who were burning, as it were, or starting to fade out, and this would help to bring them back to reality. Hello? Something happened to the line here. Hello?
I'm with you. I'm just answering the phones, getting some callers ready for you.
Okay.
As a matter of fact, let's go to them right now. Let's go up into Carpinteria, and there we will find Sheila. There's Sheila right there. Hello, Sheila.
Good morning.
Good morning.
How are you this morning?
I'm fine. How about yourself?
I'm just
I
fine.
just hope my voice holds up. It's already breaking down, but I'm trying. Go ahead.
Are you sounding okay?
Okay, good.
Oh, boy. Mr. Bielek?
Yes, you're very weak. Can you talk louder?
Okay, can you hear me now?
Just about.
You have to speak up real, real strong. He's in Phoenix.
Okay. Well, I wish I was. My main question, and this is coming from a quote directly from you out of the UFO Universe article. You state that you have two identities. I'd like to know when Edward Cameron was born and when Alfred Bielek was born. That's my first question.
Cameron was born in August 1916 and went through this entire sequence in the Philadelphia experiment as described, schooling into the Navy as an officer, part of the experiment. When the experiment failed, he remained in the Navy until 1947, whereupon the Navy, or whomever, decided he was expendable, and part of the story, of course, has not been told as of tonight, but you may be familiar with it. Was pulled up to 1983, brainwashed, completely altered, and then sent back with a complete new set of memories as Al Bielek. Now, this was so thoroughly buried and so thoroughly done in terms of the brainwashing that none of the memories of this came back until about 2 years ago as to what had happened. And my brother had the same thing. It was about a little over 2 years ago when he started to remember also.
Yeah, let me touch on that a little bit, if I can, Alan. What kind of reaction did you have to this? Your mind must have been telling you things you all of a sudden you were not aware of, right?
Well, for a period of time, I was aware of things that did not fit, we'll put it that way.
Right.
I'd have flashing memories of things which would suddenly fade out, and then you have that lingering afterthought. What was it? I remembered something. It's gone now.
Mm-hmm.
This went on for a long period of time. And I always had the strange feelings that I didn't quite belong with the Bielek family. That it just wasn't right. There was something wrong.
Wow. Sheila, you have another question for him?
Yes.
Okay.
Another quote from you, sir. It says, you said, you may not believe this, but secret government agencies have the ability to arrange new bodies for souls who previous physical bodies have died. My brother's soul was introduced to a body that was born in 1951, and it goes down further. For reasons I can't explain at this time, they can't allow my brother or myself to die. It was arranged that I should have the body and background of Alfred Bielek, born 1927. That blows my mind.
That's taken out of the story from where?
That's from UFO Universe.
Okay, they were probably quoting from my earlier tape. I don't know which edition of the UFO Universe that is. I've not seen it.
It's the most current one. It's May of 90. It's the Brad Steiger interview with you.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I did do an interview with him. That's correct. Now, they do have that kind of capability, but the problem there is also it involves agencies beyond the U.S. government. And that capability has been developed in recent years. How recent, I don't know. let us say, for example, perhaps the last 10 or 15 years, but I'm not certain when they developed that capability. But they are able to manipulate people like this to an incredible degree.
Wow.
All right, Sheila.
Well, we're just thankful we have you to tell the story.
Okay.
Thank you.
I have to touch on that last question because all I could think of in my mind was reincarnation of some sort.
Yes, in essence, that's true. That was done with my brother. That was a controlled condition.
But is he your brother?
Yes, he legally is a half-brother because of the Cameron side connection. I am still in the original body. He is not.
I see. Okay. We are talking with Al Bielek. He's the gentleman that ran the equipment aboard the Eldridge, part of the Philadelphia experiment. If you have a question for him, this is your opportunity of a lifetime to literally ask this man what...
I have long believed that mentally there are alternate dimensions, that it's not another universe so much as another dimension, coexistence, and not visible normally to the five senses. Would this be the type of thing that would apply to the Eldridge? And question number 2, are those people who disappeared alive, though invisible, in another coexistent dimension? And if you understand my questions, let me know, and I want to tape you for about a dozen other people to hear.
Okay.
Did you get the questions, Al?
Okay, question...
All right, I'm going to hang up and tape. Is that all right?
Al, did you get her questions?
Yes.
Okay, thank
All
you.
right, thank you.
Okay, G.
Right.
Bye-bye. Right out.
The first question was about alternate dimensions. Now, this is part of the aspect which was explored back in the 20s and so forth by David Hilbert in his so-called Hilbert space, which is the mathematical basis and derivation for multiple realities in multiple space. Now, this is all highly mathematical, but nevertheless, he was describing the possibilities of there being other realities, not another universe, as the lady said, but other realities associated with ours which you normally can't tap. And also the idea of alternate realities, if you will, which is to say we today are the result of what happened in the past, but if something else in the past had been a little bit different, today would also be different. Whatever happens today and what we experience as a reality today is a result of the past, but it also can be a little bit different than we have experienced it. Now, this gets into the realm of pure mathematics and mathematical speculation, but nonetheless, when you deal with this sort of thing, you are looking at the possibilities of alternate realities, and you're also looking with the proper hardware of the possibility of going into these alternate realities.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what happened to the Eldridge was it dropped into a hyperspace, and a hyperspace condition, which mathematically is correct and mathematically is described and has been for decades. Hilbert was, I think, the first to define it very carefully. Then, of course, there was Van Neumann, there was Einstein, and there are others who have gotten into this act, if you will, in describing it and trying to build hardware to utilize these mathematical principles.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the other part of the question which she asked was with the alternate realities or that sort of thing. Trying to remember exactly how she phrased that second part of the question.
Oh boy, don't do this to me. She's gone.
Okay. All of this is possible, and the idea of alternate realities is real. It is not another universe per se.
Mm-hmm.
This gets into a totally different aspect of mathematics. But it is quite possible, and these people, as she asked, what happened to them from the Eldridge? Are they living today in another reality?
Right.
The answer is, so far as I know, no. They disappeared and they died, or they went to the funny farms. Those who survived.
Oh boy. Okay, Al Bielek is my guest, and now I'm honored to bring on our next caller and superstar himself, Roger Nelson. Hello, Roger.
All right, you nice, Billy. Good evening to you.
Good evening.
And Mr. Bielek, a very, very interesting experience, obviously, you had on the Eldridge there, sir. I read the book by Berlitz and Moore a couple of years ago, and am glancing right now at the new copy of UFO Universe, where you explain here, to quote the article, the UFOs had been trying to warn us that we must not attempt to do the experiment on August 12th because the Earth has a particular biorhythm, and it wouldn't have been in sync with Nikola Tesla's zero-time generator. Now, I wonder if, sir, you would explain to us, for the benefit of the audience, the zero-time generator, the zero-time reference, why it was crucial for this to be perfect, to pull off the Philadelphia experiment with no negative effects, and exactly what the main problem was in doing it on August 12th with the zero-time generator and reference being out of sync.
Okay. Excuse me.
That's okay.
The zero-time reference generator was a device originally developed by Nikola Tesla back in the 20s. The idea and the concept is that we have a geocentric center in our galaxy to which all time is referenced. All of the planets in the solar systems which are stable in their orbits are in essence locked to this zero-time reference point, and you can extract on a given planet such as Earth a zero-time reference tying back to that geocentric center of the universe. It is essential to have that zero-time reference in order to make certain types of electronic equipment function. That is, anything which is generating a higher order function than the normal electromagnetic, which is classed as first level or first level wave, the first order functions in terms of electromagnetics. When you go to the second order function, you're dealing with a scalar energy, which is an electrostatic potential, and that is described by Maxwell in his equations, and is rather glossed over these days in the universities. You go to third order, fourth order, fifth order, and so forth. None of these can be generated unless you have an absolute sync to the center of the universe for the zero-time generator. Now, the zero-time generator, insofar as Tesla's design was concerned, was a mechanical device, electromechanical, which, after it was operating, locked into the Earth's field and then was locked to the zero-time reference. The reason why these other things, these higher order realities of waves, so to speak, will not function without that is because you cannot get everything to synchronize with an ordinary crystal oscillator, because it isn't referenced to anything except itself, and the frequency will change no matter how accurate they are.
How is it that they determined that August 12th wouldn't provide this resonance? How do they measure that?
They did not at that time. The August 12th was a drop-dead date assigned by the Navy. And we tried to find out why they were so adamant about this, and we never could get an adequate answer. The only thing we know is that it came from the CNO himself, and why he was concerned with this, we don't know, because he was at that time allegedly concerned with the conduct of the war on all theaters of operations so far as the Navy was concerned. The zero-time reference was working. The equipment did lock to it. The problem was not with the zero-time reference. The problem was with the fact that you had two experiments going on exactly 40 years apart at two different dates, two different eras, so to speak, both August 12th. And because of the Earth's biorhythms and the fact that they peak out every 20 years, this provided the additional impetus, if you will, the additional coupling effect, which caused the lockup. There was no lockup on the 22nd of July test. This only occurred on the 12th of August.
How's that, Roger Nelson?
Very good. One other thing, Mr. Bielek, I wanted to know if you had perhaps, I heard you last week mentioning that you didn't know of any particular Albert Einstein involvement with the project, if I heard you right. Were you familiar with the fact that in books by David Childress, he mentions that Einstein was seen on the ship in the days before the experiment?
Yes.
Oh, boy.
I'm familiar with that. There must have been a misquote or a misunderstanding. So Einstein was not directly concerned with the experiment as a project which he was alone concerned with. He was concerned with all research projects at the Institute. He was concerned about that one. I do know of a story which is told in which, when the changes were made between the 22nd of July and the 12th of August. Correctly? Yes, we did at that time. After I was on board in 1940, he was there until he left in March of 42. Up until the time that he retired from RCA, because he was Vice President, Director of all engineering worldwide from 35 to 39 at RCA in New Jersey, Camden, which was fairly convenient to the Institute. He was only there as a consultant periodically, but after he was out of that, he was there more often. I did work with him, but he did not stay on board, so to speak, on a continuous basis. He had a lot of other projects going, and he usually showed up 2 or 3 times a week.
Oh, what kind of guy was he? How did he project himself?
Not as extensively as with Ben Neumann.
Excuse me?
He was just continuing. Your question was beautiful. Go back with that, Bill.
What kind of guy? How did he project himself?
How did he present himself?
Uh-huh.
Very retiring, somewhat withdrawn, but very knowledgeable. And he gave the orders as to what he wanted done, and other people did it.
Did he joke or anything? Nice guy, cold, or...
Hold it, Bill. He's talking while you're talking.
Too well.
That's okay. We can all hear him, and you'll be able to hear it. What were you saying again, Al? Finish up on that as about joking?
I said Tesla did not build any equipment himself, not for a long time.
Uh-huh.
He did, of course, back in his earlier years, but in the last 10 years of his life, roughly, particularly on that project, he didn't build anything himself. He gave orders and directions as to what was to be built, and it was built either in the shops there at Princeton, that is the Institute. A very large equipment was contracted for and built outside.
All right, Bill, one more question if you like.
What kind of side effects did you have when the experiment went on afterwards?
The side effects were very powerful. There was a lasting effect on a lot of the people. Those who were below decks, shielded by the steel, did not have that much side effect, very little. Those who were on deck were the ones that had the serious problems. They were completely nauseated, disoriented, lost their time locks in the final experiment on 12 August. And that was the problem where they started drifting loose. It's a very complex matter. But they went quite literally insane in many cases. Those who were on the decks.
Wow.
And the stories are also that there were two others who jumped overboard besides my brother and myself. They were never seen again.
How's that, Bill?
Wow.
Yeah, it is going to get better. It's just starting. We're just warming up for the first night back.
Hey, guy, what's your new schedule? I don't know it anymore.
Okay, the new schedule is midnight to 2 or 3, depending on how things are going up at 2 o'clock.
All right.
And how I'm hanging, okay?
All right.
And I hope you can stand it, man. I want you to be with me.
No problem.
Thanks a lot, Bill.
Take care.
All right, bye-bye.
Al Bielek is my guest, and boy, he is fascinating. If you have a question for him, all our lines are tied up right now, but feel free to call at 451-5834 from out-of-state area code 702-451-5834. Let me ask you this, Al. There was Nikola Tesla, who at that time, I'm sure, was just another person in your life, in your space. You probably didn't know much about him at that point. Was there anything different about him?
Well,
they said that he had like a charisma, and he was loaded with electricity, they say.
That I don't have any recollection of. He was different in the sense that his attitudes, his presentation of himself was not that of an ordinary person.
Uh-huh.
However, he was, of course, very erudite. He was not highly educated in the normal sense of the word, that is, of having a lot of schooling in back of him, because he went to 1 year of college and had to drop out because his father died in 1879.
Uh-huh.
And he did not have a formal degree as such, though he was given an honorary doctorate later in the U.S.
Mm-hmm.
But he was not ignorant of what was going on. He was highly intuitive.
I can see Crystal in Crestline right now. She was telling me some stories about, she was 6 years old, and her dream was, at 6 years old, mind you, Al, her dream was to go to the planetarium and play with a Tesla coil. At 6 years old. Are you right? That was her when she was a young child.
Who was this?
A gal who listens to us right now out in Crestline, California. Her name is Crystal. She was telling me how enthralled she was with this man, Nikola Tesla. And I can see her beaming right now as she listens to the happening tonight. Al Bielek is my guest, and Billy in Ontario
Is sitting there. I can see her right now. Look at the smile on her face.
It's your turn, Billy.
Hi, Bill.
Hi.
I'm so happy to have you back. Hello, Mr. Bielek.
I can almost hear you.
You have to speak up, Billy, baby.
All right.
All right.
That's better.
I am, this is the most incredible story. I heard about it in the 60s, and I've always wanted to know more about it. You mentioned that some of the men were embedded in the hull.
Yes.
Could you elaborate on that?
Yes, there were two embedded in the steel deck and two in steel bulkheads. When they lost their time locks, their time references, and the ship had the equipment smashed so that it came back to normal space and time, they were floating, so to speak, without reference. The ship had its own reference, which was still functioning. But the individuals had lost their references to the time in which they are normally locked. See, a human being is a peculiar animal. He's not only a physical being, he's a spiritual being. At the time of conception, every individual has what could be called a set of time locks on the normal stream of time or the flow, so that you are locked to that point from conception on and you flow with the normal time flow, and you're part of the reality that everybody knows, and of course you wake up the next morning, you know the same people, you're in the same time frame, things flow in a normal manner, which everybody accepts. But if those time locks are broken loose for any reason, and that's what happened to a number of the people on the Eldridge as a result of the very high-powered magnetic equipment, the pulsing magnetic fields, if they're locked loose, knocked loose from their normal locks, as long as they are within the confined field of the Eldridge as it was when it was on, they didn't float away, they didn't go away, but when the fields went down, that is after the equipment was shut off and destroyed in part, wherever they happened to be when they remanifested in terms of physical reality in our normal three-dimensional frame of reference, if they were not in the same physical location that they had been in reference to the ship, when the ship rematerialized and then they rematerialized, they could be anywheres. And what happened in 4 of the cases there, they happened to be in the wrong place when the ship rematerialized and the steel deck or steel wall materialized, and they happened to be in the same location, and suddenly the molecular structure of the steel was locked into the molecular structure of their body.
Oh, my. I can visualize it, but boy, it must be painful. Oh, not only that, but I can you can see how it could happen.
A painful way to die.
I guess. How's that, Billy?
That was just incredible. You know, John Lear mentioned that we were containers when you had him on. And I'm just wondering if sometime you might get John Lear and maybe Bill Cooper and Mr. What was the name again?
Bielek?
Yes.
Bielek.
Yeah.
Mr. Bielek on together on a on a hookup, and it would be a really fantastic privilege to be able to listen to the exchange.
Right.
And one other thing I'd like to say to all the listeners who love you so much, Billy, I think we all ought to send a little postcard in saying how much we love you and how glad we are to have you back, and stay well.
Well, thank you very much for the
And
call.
I'll look forward to reading. What was the name of your book again, Mr. Bielek?
The name of your book, Al?
We don't know yet when it'll be out. Hopefully late spring. And it will be done in connection with Brad Steiger. We're supposed to start on it finally near the end of this week or next week. And it will be first an update of some work which Brad had done previously. The title is not exactly firm yet, but it will, as soon as it is, I can let you know on that.
All right, Billy.
We'll be waiting
one question, though, for the lady who called in. She mentioned the fact that she had heard of the Philadelphia experiment in the 60s.
Yeah.
Can she say where she heard of it?
Where did you hear about it, Billy?
I have a precocious friend named Marvin, and he was a reader of Tesla, and I was excited about Tesla back then too, and he told me about the experiment, and where Marvin got the information, I don't know. I can find out.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you, Billy.
God bless.
All right. Bye-bye. Interesting questions, though, huh? Al? Good audience. Are you in a hurry at all?
No, I'm not.
Oh, you sound very relaxed. It's a pleasure to have you on board. Stick around and get back to your phone calls and more with Al Bielek. We have one line open for you, and that's the brand new member line at 702-451-5655. We'll get back to more of your telephone calls and your questions for my guest tonight, Al Bielek, and more of your Billy Goodman Happening after these messages. Are you having any trouble hearing the Billy Goodman Happening tonight? Maybe a little static here and there, fading in and out. You want to end that problem? Why don't you try the GE Super Radio? And by the way, the House of Right in Downey, California, will guarantee that you'll get better reception of the Billy Goodman Happening or your money back. A 30-day guarantee. You don't get that anywhere else. Would you like to take advantage of that? Then you call the House of Right and talk to Larry or Dean. They have toll-free numbers for you. In California, it's 800-245-9813. Outside of California, just call 800-772-0794. Mention you heard this offer on the Billy Goodman Happening, and they'll give you that 30-day guarantee offer. It's that simple. If your reception does not improve, you get your money back, no questions asked. So what are you waiting for? Give them a call first thing tomorrow morning. That's right. Ask for Larry or Dean. They'll take good care of you. Just unheard on the Billy Goodman Happening. That's all you have to do. I mean, everybody's raving about this radio. I mean, literally raving about it. It has changed their lives because they can hear stations they never heard before, but they knew they were there, especially for us
It's been beautiful. Let's go out and talk with George. George is standing by, and I know George has always got some great questions. Hi, George.
Good evening, gentlemen. Al, can you hear me?
Al, can you hear him?
You're a little weak.
Al, can you give us some details about the 1983 experiment, and also what was being attempted at that time, and what were the end results? I'll take my answer off the air. Thank you.
First of all, before you go, George, did you get the question, Billy?
He was referring to 1983.
Right, exactly, yeah.
And what was going on there.
Mm-hmm.
This was a project which had been ongoing for a number of years, actually from the 60s, so-called Phoenix Project. It is still, it is no longer in operation, but nevertheless it is still considered a classified project. I can only give you some minimum detail on that. The operation was in the original location at Montauk, Long Island. Unlike the movie, which put it in Wendover, Utah, in the old air base, which it was not. The other terminal was in Long Island at Montauk Point, which is the extreme eastern tip of Long Island.
Mm-hmm.
The equipment was similar but more powerful and updated, involving modern computers like the ABM 360 and some other specialized computers. And the purpose of that was manifold, but one of the final things they did was the capability of time travel and doing it any place, any time. It was because of the nature of the equipment and the fact they also used a zero-time reference, and the fact that both sets of equipments, if you will, were designed in essence by the same man, Dr. John Van Neumann. The approaches were similar. The fields they generated were similar, though mathematically they were not identical. But they locked up because of that strange effect of the Earth and the 20-year intervals. The purpose was not the same as with the Eldridge and with the original invisibility experiment. They had no intent to create anything invisible. There was not the purpose at all of the Phoenix end. It's merely the fact that the equipments were similar and the dates were propitious. The thing locked up. Now, does that answer the gentleman's question, I hope?
I think very thoroughly. You're certainly a very concise man, isn't he, folks? Al Bielek is my guest. He is in Phoenix. I am here in Las Vegas. You're listening to the Billy Goodman Happening, the only scientific spiritual happening anywhere in the entire universe. And we are about to go out, or actually down to San Diego. And there's Francis. Hello, Francis.
Hello.
Oh, yes. Speak up, please.
All right. I heard you speak, Mr. Bielek, in San Diego. You said at that time that Tesla didn't have the solution to the personnel problem. Can you tell us who and how you gained the knowledge or the solution to that?
The solution to that was worked out by Dr. Van Neumann. Now, after the experiment, the Philadelphia experiment, that was in 43, he was transferred to Los Alamos, New Mexico, to work on the atomic bomb project, along with Dr. J. Robert Oppenheimer, Vannevar Bush, and a few other people. And the project was complete, and the war was over. In 1947, after some major changes in the Defense Department establishment, he was reapproached and asked if he would reopen the matter of the Philadelphia experiment and see if he could find out what really went wrong and whether there was anything salvageable from that. Without going into a lot of the other side issues here, along about 1949, he had some insights into the problem. He spent over 2 years on it. And of course, he was involved in some other things at the same time, but he decided that he had to go back and do his basic homework in metaphysics.